You're trapped and you know it. Every Monday morning feels the same. The alarm goes off, you drag yourself out of bed, and you spend another day trading hours for dollars in a job that doesn't fulfill you. You tell yourself this is temporary, that things will change, but months turn into years and you're still running on the same wheel. The rat race isn't just exhausting, it's stealing your life one day at a time. Here's why this matters. The rat race doesn't end by accident. You don't accidentally build a life of freedom while following the same patterns that keep everyone else trapped. Freedom requires different habits than imprisonment. And right now, your daily habits are writing a script for more of the same. Let me show you what's really happening. You wake up, check your phone, rush through a morning, commute to work, spend 8 hours doing tasks someone else assigned, commute home, collapse on the couch, distract yourself until bedtime, and repeat. These aren't habits, they're a treadmill. And treadmills don't take you anywhere no matter how fast you run. Pay attention to this part. Success isn't about working harder on the treadmill. It's about getting off the treadmill entirely. And getting off requires building a completely different set of daily habits. Habits that most people never develop because they're too busy maintaining the patterns that keep them stuck. Here's what makes the rat race so insidious. It feels necessary. You need the paycheck. You have bills. You have responsibilities. So you convince yourself you'll escape later, after you save more money, after you get the promotion, after things settle down. But later never comes because the habits that keep you trapped aren't building the skills that create freedom. Most people spend their entire careers waiting for permission to leave the rat race. They're waiting for enough money, enough security, enough certainty. But freedom doesn't come from having enough. It comes from becoming someone who doesn't need the race anymore. And that becoming happens through daily habits, not eventual circumstances. This is where things change. Escaping the rat race isn't about one big decision or one lucky break. It's about systematically building habits that create options. Habits that build skills. Habits that generate income outside your job. Habits that reduce your dependence on the very system that's trapping you. Think about two people with the same job, same income, same responsibilities. One spends their free time on autopilot, scrolling, watching, consuming, recovering from work. The other spends 30 minutes daily building a skill, 30 minutes building a side income stream, 30 minutes investing in their education. 5 years later, they're living completely different lives. Same starting point, different habits, different outcomes. Here's the shift you need to make immediately. Stop treating your non-work hours as recovery time from work. Start treating them as building time for your escape. Every hour you spend in consumption mode is an hour you're not spending building the life that frees you from needing to recover. But there's a psychological barrier here. After a full day of work, you're exhausted. Building something feels impossible. You deserve rest. And that logic sounds reasonable, but it's the exact logic that keeps people trapped for decades. You're too tired from the race to build an exit from the race. Most people won't break this pattern because it requires energy they feel they don't have. They're stuck in a cycle. Work drains them, so they rest. Rest doesn't build anything, so they need to keep working. The cycle continues because they never create the energy and focus needed to build an alternative. Here's what happens when you change your habits. First, you feel the discomfort of doing something after work instead of collapsing. Second, you notice you're building something even slowly. Third, that building creates hope and energy that weren't there before. And fourth, you start seeing a possible path out that didn't exist when you were just surviving. And here's the part that changes everything. The rat race survives on your exhaustion. It needs you too tired to think, too drained to build, too stressed to imagine alternatives. The moment you start directing energy toward building instead of just recovering, you're threatening the entire system that depends on your compliance. So here's what you do starting today. Identify 1 hour in your week, just 1 hour, that you currently spend in consumption or recovery mode. Redirect that hour toward building one skill or one income stream that could eventually replace your job income. Not 7 hours. 1 hour. Prove to yourself that building is possible even while trapped. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people reading this will agree with everything and do nothing differently. They'll close this book, return to their exact same evening routine, and wonder why nothing ever changes. Because knowing you're in the rat race doesn't free you. Only different habits free you. The question you need to answer is this: are you tired enough of the race to actually change your daily patterns, or are you just tired enough to complain about it? Because one leads to freedom. The other leads to decades more of the same exhaustion. What's coming next reveals the first habit that separates people who escape from people who stay trapped forever. You wake up reactive. The alarm sounds and the first thing you do is check your phone. Messages, emails, news, social media, other people's priorities flood your consciousness before you've even formed a thought of your own. And in that moment, you've already lost. Because the first hour of your day determines whether you're living your agenda or someone else's. Here's why this matters. Successful people who escape the rat race protect their mornings like their life depends on it. Because it does. The morning is when your willpower is highest, your mind is clearest, and your ability to focus on what matters is strongest. Waste that time on other people's agendas and you'll spend the rest of the day reacting. Let me show you what's really happening. You check your phone within minutes of waking. You see messages that create tiny obligations. You see news that creates anxiety. You see social media that creates comparison. And before you've done anything productive, you've already depleted mental energy responding to inputs you didn't choose and don't control. Pay attention to this part. People trapped in the rat race are trapped because they never take control of their time. They spend every day responding to external demands, their job, their boss, their obligations, their devices. They never create space to work on what would actually free them because they're always responding to what keeps them trapped. Here's what makes morning habits so critical. If you start your day working on your escape plan before you work on your job's demands, you make daily progress toward freedom. If you start your day responding to your job's demands, you make daily progress toward staying employed. Both require the same amount of time. Only one builds an exit. Most people never develop a morning routine that serves their goals because they don't believe they have time. They're already rushed. They're already stressed. Adding anything feels impossible. But here's the truth, you have the same hours as everyone else. You're just spending them on things that don't build the life you want. This is where things change. A powerful morning routine doesn't require 3 hours. It requires one focused hour before the world makes demands on you. 1 hour spent building a skill, working on a side business, investing in education, or creating something that could generate income. 1 hour of offense instead of defense. Think about what happens over time. 1 hour daily is 7 hours weekly. That's 365 hours annually, the equivalent of 9 full work weeks. Most people say they don't have time to build something on the side. But they have 9 full work weeks of time, they're just spending it scrolling, watching, and reacting. Here's the shift you need to make. Wake up 1 hour earlier than you currently do. Use that hour on the single most important activity that moves you toward freedom, not urgency, not other people's priorities, freedom. Protect that hour like it's sacred. Because it is. It's the hour that could change everything. But there's a massive psychological barrier here. Going to bed earlier and waking up earlier requires discipline you don't currently have. You're exhausted at night from work, so you stay up late trying to feel like you have free time. Then you're exhausted in the morning, so you sleep as late as possible. This cycle keeps you reactive. Most people won't change their morning routine because changing mornings requires changing evenings. And changing evenings means admitting that the 3 hours you spend watching shows or scrolling could be spent sleeping so you can wake early and build something. That admission is uncomfortable because it means you're choosing entertainment over freedom. Here's what happens when you implement a powerful morning routine. First, you feel the discomfort of waking early. Your body resists. But second, you experience something you haven't felt in years: control. You're doing something for your goals before anyone makes demands on you. That feeling is addictive. Third, you make visible progress on your escape plan. And fourth, you develop identity as someone who builds their future, not just survives their present. And here's the part that changes everything. Once you protect your morning, everything else shifts. You go through your workday knowing you've already done the most important thing. Work becomes something you do to fund your real project, not your entire existence. The psychological shift from "this job is my life" to "this job funds my escape" is massive. So here's what you do starting tomorrow. Set your alarm 1 hour earlier. Put your phone across the room so you have to get out of bed. Use that hour on one focused activity that builds your exit strategy. Not checking email. Not scrolling. Building. Do this for 7 days before deciding if it's worth it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will read this, agree with it, and change nothing. They'll keep waking up to their phone, responding to other people's priorities, and wondering why they never make progress on their own goals. Because knowing what to do isn't the same as doing it. The question you need to answer is this: is 1 hour of morning focus worth 1 hour less of evening entertainment? Because that's the trade. You can't create a powerful morning routine without sacrificing something else. And most people choose entertainment over freedom every single day. What's coming next reveals the habit that multiplies the effectiveness of everything else you do. You're busy but you're not productive. Your days are full of activity, meetings, emails, tasks, urgency, but when the week ends you've made no real progress on anything that matters. You're confusing motion with movement. And that confusion is keeping you trapped because busy people who don't prioritize stay busy forever without getting anywhere. Here's why this matters. The rat race rewards busyness while punishing priorities. Your job wants you busy responding to whatever's urgent. But urgent is rarely important. And if you never work on important, you never build anything that frees you from needing the job. Let me show you what's really happening. You have a list of things to do. Most of them are other people's priorities disguised as your tasks. You spend your day checking boxes, responding to requests, and handling whatever fire is currently burning. At the end of the day you're exhausted, but if you're honest, you didn't do anything that moves your life forward. Pay attention to this part. There's a difference between being productive and being busy. Productivity means making measurable progress toward goals that matter to you. Busyness means staying occupied with tasks that keep the system running but don't change your position in it. One builds freedom. The other maintains captivity. Here's what makes this distinction so critical. You only have so much energy and time. Every hour spent on busy work is an hour not spent on productive work. And if your days are consumed by busy work, you will never escape because escape requires productive work that your job doesn't care about and won't reward. Most people never learn to prioritize ruthlessly because they're afraid. Saying no to busy work means disappointing people. Ignoring urgent but unimportant tasks means facing consequences. So they say yes to everything, stay busy, and never have time for what actually matters. They're protecting relationships and reputation while sacrificing their future. This is where things change. People who escape the rat race master a skill that trapped people never develop: ruthless prioritization. They identify the one or two activities that will create the most leverage toward freedom, and they do those things before anything else. Everything else gets minimal attention or gets ignored entirely. Think about the Pareto principle: 80% of results come from 20% of actions. Most people spend 80% of their time on the 20% of actions that produce minimal results. They're busy with low-leverage activities. Meanwhile, successful people spend 80% of their time on the 20% of actions that produce 80% of results. Same hours, different focus, massively different outcomes. Here's the shift you need to make. Every morning, identify the one task that, if completed, would make the most significant progress toward your escape plan. Not the most urgent task. Not the easiest task. The most important task. Do that first before anything else. Treat everything else as secondary. But there's a psychological challenge here. Important tasks are usually hard, uncomfortable, and don't provide immediate gratification. Busy work feels easier because it's familiar and it gives you the satisfaction of checking boxes. Your brain prefers busy work because it feels productive without being threatening. Most people won't adopt ruthless prioritization because it requires disappointing others and tolerating discomfort. When you ignore urgent but unimportant requests to focus on important but not urgent work, people get frustrated. They don't understand why you're not responding. And that social pressure pushes most people back into busyness. Here's what happens when you prioritize ruthlessly. First, you face resistance, from others and from yourself. Second, you make real progress on work that actually matters for the first time in years. Third, you realize most urgent things weren't actually important and nothing terrible happened when you ignored them. And fourth, you develop the confidence to protect your priorities even more aggressively. And here's the part that changes everything. Once you've experienced the difference between being busy and being productive, you can't go back. You see clearly how much time you were wasting on activities that didn't matter. And you become protective of your time in ways that trap people never understand. So here's what you do starting today. Make a list of every task and obligation you have. Then honestly categorize each one. Does this move me toward freedom or does this keep the current system running? The freedom tasks get your best time and energy. The system maintenance tasks get whatever's left, if anything. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people's entire task list is system maintenance. They have zero activities that actually build toward freedom. And they wonder why years pass and nothing changes. Because nothing on their list was designed to create change, only to maintain the status quo. The question you need to answer is this. If you ruthlessly prioritized and only worked on the tasks that build your escape, what would you have to stop doing? And are you willing to disappoint the people who depend on you doing those things? Because freedom requires saying no to almost everything so you can say yes to the one thing that matters. What's coming next reveals the habit that turns knowledge into actual results. You're learning constantly, but nothing's changing. You've read books, watched videos, taken courses, consumed countless content about success and freedom. Your head is full of information about what you should do. But your life looks exactly the same because knowing isn't doing, and doing is what creates results. Here's why this matters. The rat race loves educated prisoners. It loves people who know what they should do but never do it. Because knowledge without execution is harmless. It's entertainment that makes you feel productive while keeping you exactly where you are. Let me show you what's really happening. You finish a book about building a business, feel motivated for 3 days, and then return to your exact same routine. You watch a video about financial freedom, get inspired, and then do nothing differently with your money. You learn about time management, nod along, and then waste your evening the same way you always do. Learning has become a substitute for action. Pay attention to this part. There are 2 types of people, those who learn and those who implement. Learners collect information, feel temporarily motivated, and stay stuck. Implementers take one idea, execute it completely, get results, and move forward. Learners know more. Implementers achieve more. And achievement is what escapes the rat race, not knowledge. Here's what makes perpetual learning so dangerous. Feels productive. You're investing in yourself. You're growing. You're becoming more knowledgeable. But if that knowledge never translates into changed behavior and different results, you're not growing, you're consuming. And consumption keeps you comfortable while implementation makes you uncomfortable. Most people become perpetual learners because implementation is risky. If you learn about starting a business but never start one, you can't fail at business. If you learn about investing but never invest, you can't lose money. Learning lets you feel like you're moving forward while protecting you from the consequences of actually moving. This is where things change. Successful people have a completely different relationship with learning. They learn with implementation in mind. They take one concept, apply it immediately, get feedback from reality, and adjust. They're not trying to know everything, they're trying to do one thing well enough to get results. Think about someone who reads 10 books about building a business but never starts versus someone who reads one chapter, implements what they learned, adjusts based on results, and repeats. The first person knows more. The second person has a business. In the rat race escape game, the business wins. Knowledge without results is worthless. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop consuming new information until you've implemented the last thing you learned. Read one chapter, apply it, get results. Watch one video, execute the strategy, see what happens. Learn less, implement more. Make execution your primary activity and learning your secondary activity. But there's a psychological trap here. Implementation requires you to confront your own limitations. When you try something and it doesn't work, you can't blame the information, you have to look at your execution. Learning lets you stay in the safe space of potential. Implementation drags you into the uncomfortable space of actual ability. Most people won't shift from learning to implementing because implementation means risking failure in front of yourself and others. It's safer to stay in learning mode, collecting more information, waiting until you feel fully prepared. But full preparation never comes, and waiting is just fear disguised as thoroughness. Here's what happens when you prioritize implementation. First, you fail at things you thought you understood. That's uncomfortable. Second, you learn more from one failed implementation than from 10 books. Third, you start getting actual results instead of just feeling informed. And fourth, you develop the confidence that comes from doing, not just knowing. And here's the part that changes everything. Once you've implemented something and seen results, even small results, you develop a bias toward action. You stop needing perfect information before starting. You trust that you'll figure it out as you go. And that bias toward action is what actually creates freedom while perpetual learners stay trapped. So here's what you do starting now. Identify one thing you already know you should do to escape the rat race. Not something new you need to learn, something you already know. Then do it. Today. Not perfectly. Not after more research. Just do it, get feedback, and adjust. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people's bookshelves and browser histories are graveyards of information they consumed and never used. They're evidence of time spent learning that could have been spent doing. And doing, even imperfectly, beats learning every single time when the goal is actual freedom. The question you need to answer is this: are you learning to avoid doing, or are you learning to improve your doing? Because one is procrastination disguised as productivity. The other is actual growth. And you can tell which one you're doing by looking at your results, not your knowledge. What's coming next reveals the habit that determines whether your progress compounds or evaporates. You start strong and fade fast. Every few months you get motivated and begin working on your escape plan. You're consistent for 2 weeks, maybe 3. Then something happens, life gets busy, you get tired, motivation wanes, and you stop. Months pass. You start again. Same pattern. And this cycle of starting and stopping is why you've been in the rat race for years. Here's why this matters. Escaping the rat race isn't about intensity, it's about consistency. 1 hour daily for a year beats 10 hours weekly for a month. Because compound growth only works when there's something to compound. And if you keep resetting to zero, nothing compounds. Let me show you what's really happening. You operate in bursts. You get excited about a project, pour energy into it, make some progress, and then burn out. During the burnout phase, you do nothing. And the progress you made degrades. By the time you start again, you're essentially starting from scratch. You're confusing motion with progress. Pay attention to this part. The people who escape the rat race aren't more talented or more motivated than you. They're just more consistent. They show up when they don't feel like it. They do the work when it's not exciting. They maintain effort through the boring middle where most people quit. That consistency is their entire advantage. Here's what makes consistency so powerful. Small actions repeated daily compound into massive results over time. 30 minutes daily on a side business is 182 hours annually. That's over 4 full work weeks. But only if you maintain it. 30 minutes daily for 2 weeks followed by nothing for 10 weeks equals zero compound effect. Most people fail at consistency because they're optimizing for motivation instead of system. They wait to feel motivated before taking action. And since motivation is unreliable, their action is unreliable. They have good days and bad days, good weeks and bad weeks, and they never build momentum because momentum requires sustained effort. This is where things change. Successful people don't rely on motivation, they rely on systems. They create environments and routines that make the right actions automatic. They show up at the same time in the same place to do the same work whether they feel like it or not. They've removed motivation from the equation. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wait for motivation to brush them. You don't skip brushing because you don't feel like it. You brush automatically because it's a system, a routine that happens regardless of how you feel. That's what your escape plan needs to be. Automatic. Non-negotiable. Disconnected from motivation. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop trying to find motivation. Start building a system that works without it. Same time. Same place. Same activity. Every day. No exceptions. You're not deciding daily whether you feel like working on your escape. You're executing a system that runs regardless of feelings. But there's a psychological challenge here. Systems feel boring. They lack the excitement of motivated bursts. You want to feel inspired and passionate. But inspiration is sporadic and passion fluctuates. Meanwhile, boring systems compound into extraordinary results while exciting bursts lead nowhere. Most people won't build systems because systems feel like giving up on spontaneity and passion. They want their escape journey to feel alive and energized. But here's the truth. The journey doesn't have to feel good to produce good results. Brushing your teeth doesn't feel exciting, but it produces good results. Same principle. Here's what happens when you prioritize consistency over intensity. First, you make slower initial progress than during motivated bursts. That feels disappointing. Second, you keep going through the boring middle where most people quit. Third, compound effects start appearing, skills develop, income grows, options expand. And fourth, you look back at a year and realize you've made more progress than any previous burst ever produced. And here's the part that changes everything. Consistency changes your identity. When you show up every day regardless of how you feel, you become someone who shows up. That identity shift is more valuable than the actual work output because once you're someone who shows up, everything else becomes easier. So here's what you do starting today. Choose the smallest version of your escape plan that you could maintain daily for a year. Not the impressive version. The sustainable version. Maybe it's 20 minutes. Maybe it's writing 100 words. Maybe it's making one sales call. Whatever it is, Make it small enough that you have no excuse not to do it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people would rather have heroic failures than boring successes. They want the story of intense effort and dramatic attempts. But boring consistency that produces results beats dramatic effort that produces nothing. And your goal isn't a good story, it's actual freedom. The question you need to answer is this: would you rather feel heroic while staying trapped or feel boring while building freedom? Because intensity without consistency is just another form of entertainment. Consistency without excitement is what actually works. What's coming next reveals the habit that most people resist but successful people embrace. You're comfortable, and that's the problem. Your rat race existence isn't torture, it's tolerable. The job is fine. The paycheck covers bills. Life isn't great, but it's not terrible. And that mediocre comfort is the most dangerous trap of all because it removes urgency while stealing years. Here's why this matters. Growth requires discomfort. If you're always comfortable, you're not growing. You're maintaining. And maintaining your current position means staying exactly where you are, which is trapped, just with slightly better furniture in your cage. Let me show you what's really happening. You avoid discomfort instinctively. You don't want to fail publicly by starting a business. You don't want to feel stupid learning new skills. You don't want to be tired from working extra hours on a side project. So you optimize for comfort, and comfortable people don't escape because escape requires walking through significant discomfort. Pay attention to this part. Every major breakthrough in your life came after a period of discomfort. Learning to walk, discomfort. Learning to read, discomfort. Every new skill, every achievement, every level up, discomfort preceded it. But somewhere along the way you started avoiding discomfort. And when you avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. Here's what makes comfort so dangerous. It's seductive. Feels like success. You've achieved a baseline of comfort and your brain says, protect this. But protecting comfort means avoiding risks. And avoiding risks means never building anything significant enough to free you from needing to protect your comfortable cage. Most people stay trapped not because their situation is unbearable but because it's bearable. If it were unbearable, they'd be forced to change. But bearable situations can be endured indefinitely. You can survive being moderately unhappy for decades. And that survival masquerading as living is what the rat race depends on. This is where things change. Successful people deliberately seek discomfort. They know that everything they want is on the other side of something uncomfortable. So instead of avoiding discomfort, they run toward it. They start businesses knowing they might fail. They learn skills knowing they'll feel incompetent. They take risks knowing the outcome is uncertain. Think about two people trapped in similar jobs. One optimizes every decision for comfort, staying in the known, avoiding risk, maintaining stability. The other deliberately chooses discomfort, learning new skills that feel hard, starting projects that might fail, taking actions that create uncertainty. 5 years later, they're living completely different lives. One is comfortably trapped. The other is uncomfortably free. Here's the shift you need to make. Start treating discomfort as a compass pointing toward growth. When something feels uncomfortable, that's a signal you're approaching an edge where growth happens. Most people see that signal and retreat. You need to see that signal and lean in. But there's a critical distinction here. Not all discomfort is valuable. The discomfort of staying in a toxic job isn't growth, it's damage. The discomfort of learning a new skill that expands your capabilities is growth. You need to distinguish between growth discomfort and damage discomfort. Seek the first. Eliminate the second. Most people won't embrace discomfort because they've been taught that life should feel good. They think struggle means something's wrong. But struggle means something's changing. And if nothing's changing, you're staying exactly where you are. Here's what happens when you embrace productive discomfort. First, you feel the resistance. Your brain screams at you to stop, go back to comfort, avoid the risk. Second, you push through anyway because you know growth lives there. Third, you emerge on the other side with new capabilities you didn't have before. And fourth, you develop confidence that discomfort won't kill you, it'll upgrade you. And here's the part that changes everything. Once you've walked through enough discomfort and survived, fear loses its power over you. You stop avoiding opportunities because they feel uncomfortable. You start evaluating opportunities based on potential upside, not comfort level. And that shift in decision-making is what creates extraordinary results. So here's what you do starting this week. Identify one action that would significantly advance your escape plan but feels too uncomfortable to attempt. Then do it anyway. Not because you feel ready. Not because it feels good. Because discomfort is where your freedom lives. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You've been using comfort as a guide for decision-making. If something feels comfortable, you do it. If it feels uncomfortable, you avoid it. But that strategy has produced your current life. And if you want a different life, you need a different strategy. Use discomfort as your guide instead of comfort. The question you need to answer is this: are you willing to be uncomfortable now so you can be free later, or would you rather be comfortable now and trapped forever? Because those are your options. Comfort and freedom don't coexist in the early stages of escape. What's coming next reveals the habit that multiplies the speed of your escape. You're trying to escape alone, and that's slowing you down dramatically. You think independence means doing everything yourself, figuring everything out on your own, achieving success through solo effort. But that belief, that you should do this alone, is keeping you trapped longer than necessary. Here's why this matters. Every successful person who escaped the rat race had help. They had mentors who showed them shortcuts. They had communities that provided support. They had partners who filled skill gaps. Solo success is a myth that keeps people grinding unnecessarily while connected success accelerates exponentially. Let me show you what's really happening. You're reinventing wheels that have been invented thousands of times. You're making mistakes that others could warn you about. You're spending months figuring out what someone else could teach you in an afternoon. You're being inefficient because you think asking for help is weakness. Pay attention to this part. Your network determines your net worth. This isn't just a catchy phrase, it's literally true. The people you know, learn from, and work with directly impact how fast you can build skills, find opportunities, and generate income. Isolated people might eventually succeed. Connected people succeed faster and with less unnecessary struggle. Here's what makes isolation so limiting. You only know what you know. You can only see opportunities visible from your perspective. You can only access resources available to you individually. But when you're connected to other people building similar things, you access collective knowledge, shared opportunities, and pooled resources. The leverage is massive. Most people stay isolated because they're afraid. Afraid of looking incompetent when they ask questions. Afraid of rejection when they reach out. Afraid of owing people if they accept help. So they stay in their comfort zone of solo struggle, making it harder than it needs to be while telling themselves they're being independent. This is where things change. Building a network isn't about using people. It's about creating mutual value. It's about finding people who are on similar journeys and helping each other move faster. It's about recognizing that collaboration multiplies results in ways that competition never could. Think about two people starting similar businesses. One tries to figure out everything alone, learning exclusively through trial and error. The other joins a community of entrepreneurs, asks questions, shares struggles, and learns from others' successes and failures. 6 months later, the second person is miles ahead. Not because they're smarter, because they're connected. Here's the shift you need to make. Start actively building relationships with people who are where you want to be or heading in similar directions. Join communities. Attend events. Reach out to people you admire. Ask questions. Offer value. Build genuine relationships, not transactional contacts. But there's a psychological barrier here. Networking feels uncomfortable if you believe you have nothing to offer. You see successful people and think, why would they talk to me? But value exchange isn't about equal status. It's about mutual benefit. You might know something they don't. You might offer a perspective they need. You might solve a problem they have. Most people won't invest in network building because results aren't immediate. You might help someone today and not see any return for months. You might join a community and feel awkward initially. The discomfort is up front while the benefits are delayed. But those delayed benefits compound into opportunities that solo players never access. Here's what happens when you build a powerful network. First, you learn faster because you're tapping into collective knowledge. Second, opportunities appear that you would never have found alone. Third, you stay motivated because you're surrounded by people doing hard things. And fourth, you build relationships that create value for years or decades. And here's the part that changes everything. Your network becomes a force multiplier for everything you do. Need a skill? Someone in your network has it. Need an introduction? Someone knows someone. Need advice? Multiple people have been where you are. The compound effect of a strong network is impossible to achieve alone. So here's what you do starting this week. Identify 3 people you could learn from, people who've accomplished something you're working toward. Reach out to one person daily with a specific, thoughtful question or offer of value. Not a generic, "Can I pick your brain?" A genuine, specific attempt to create connection. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people's network consists entirely of people in the same trapped situation they're in. They're surrounded by people who validate their limitations rather than challenge them to grow. And that comfortable confirmation keeps them exactly where they are. The question you need to answer is this: are you surrounding yourself with people who make you feel comfortable about being trapped, or people who inspire you to do what's necessary to escape? Because your network is either holding you back or pulling you forward. There's no neutral. What's coming next reveals a habit that seems counterintuitive but determines long-term success. You're sacrificing everything for your escape plan, and that's going to backfire. You're working your job, then working your side project, then collapsing exhausted into bed. You've cut out exercise, abandoned hobbies, stopped seeing friends. You're sprinting toward freedom while destroying the body and mind you'll need once you get there. Here's why this matters. Escaping the rat race is a marathon, not a sprint. And marathons aren't won by people who sprint the first mile and collapse. They're won by people who pace themselves, maintain energy, and finish strong. You're trying to sprint a marathon and you're going to burn out before you escape. Let me show you what's really happening. You think more effort equals faster results. So you're working every available hour, sacrificing sleep, ignoring health, and pushing past sustainable limits. And in the short term you might make more progress. But that unsustainable pace ensures you'll eventually crash, lose all momentum, and return to square one. Pay attention to this part. The people who successfully escape the rat race don't work themselves into the ground. They optimize for sustainable intensity. They work hard but they also rest hard. They push but they also recover. They sprint sometimes but they pace most of the time. Because they understand that longevity beats intensity when the game is measured in years, not weeks. Here's what makes unsustainable effort so dangerous. Feels productive. You're working more hours than anyone else. You're sacrificing more than your peers. You're demonstrating commitment. But if that commitment destroys your health, damages your relationships, and leads to burnout, all that effort becomes worthless because you can't maintain it long enough to see results. Most people oscillate between extremes. They push intensely for months, burn out completely, recover for months, and repeat. They never build sustained momentum because they're always recovering from their last push. Meanwhile, people who work at 70% intensity consistently make more progress over time than people who alternate between 100% and 0. This is where things change. You need to build sustainable success habits, not unsustainable heroic efforts. That means working on your escape plan consistently, but also sleeping enough, exercising regularly, maintaining key relationships, and preserving your mental health. Because you're building a life, not just executing a project. Think about someone who works on their side business 3 hours daily while maintaining health and relationships versus someone who works 8 hours daily while sacrificing everything else. 6 months in, the first person is still going strong with their energy intact. The second person is exhausted, resentful, and likely quit. More isn't always better. Sustainable is better. Here's the shift you need to make. Instead of asking, "How much can I work?" ask, "How much can I sustain indefinitely?" Then work at that pace. It might feel slower initially, but sustainable pace maintained over years beats unsustainable sprints that lead to burnout and quitting. But there's a psychological trap here. Sustainable pace doesn't feel heroic. It doesn't give you the rush of extreme sacrifice and maximum effort. Feels almost too easy. And your ego wants the dramatic story of giving everything for your dream. But your ego isn't the one who'll pay the price when you burn out. Most people won't adopt sustainable habits because they're afraid slow and steady won't be enough. They see others sprinting and think they need to sprint too or they'll fall behind. But most people sprinting will quit. And slow sustainable beats fast unsustainable every single time in long games. Here's what happens when you build sustainable habits. First, progress feels slower than you want. That's frustrating. Second, you maintain consistency while others burn out. Third, compound effects start appearing because you've sustained effort long enough for them to materialize. And fourth, you reach your goals with your health, relationships, and sanity intact. And here's the part that changes everything. Once you've escaped the rat race, you need the energy and health to enjoy your freedom. If you destroyed your body escaping, you've just traded one cage for another. Sustainable success means you arrive free with the capacity to enjoy that freedom. So here's what you do starting today. Audit your current pace. If you're sacrificing sleep, skipping exercise, or isolating yourself, you're on an unsustainable path. Adjust. Build in recovery. Protect non-negotiables like sleep and relationships. Make your escape plan fit into a sustainable life, not replace your life entirely. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people use unsustainable effort as a way to feel like they're doing enough. They work themselves to exhaustion to quiet the voice saying they should do more. But that voice will never be satisfied. And exhaustion isn't evidence of effectiveness, it's just evidence of exhaustion. The question you need to answer is this. Do you want to escape the rat race and arrive broken, or escape the rat race and arrive whole? Because both are possible. One requires sustainable habits. The other just requires maximum effort. And only one lets you enjoy the freedom you're building. What's coming next reveals the final habit that determines whether you actually escape or just dream about it. You're planning perfectly and executing poorly. Your escape plan is detailed, researched, and comprehensive. You know exactly what you should do. But you're not doing it. You're stuck in preparation mode, convincing yourself you'll start once the plan is perfect. But the plan will never be perfect, and preparation is just another form of procrastination. Here's why this matters. The rat race loves planners who never execute. It loves people who spend years preparing to escape but never actually leave. Because preparation without execution is harmless. It's a release valve for frustration that keeps you trapped while making you feel productive. Let me show you what's really happening. You've read the books, taken the courses, written the plans. You know what you need to do. But knowing and doing are separated by a massive gap called execution. And most people never cross that gap because execution is risky while planning feels safe. Pay attention to this part. Your perfect plan is a fantasy. Reality will not match your plan no matter how detailed it is. The market will be different than you expect. Your execution will be messier than you planned. Unexpected obstacles will appear. The plan you're perfecting will become obsolete the moment you start. So perfecting it is wasting time. Here's what makes overplanning so dangerous. It feels like progress. You're working on your escape. You're being thoughtful and strategic. But if you're spending more time planning than executing, you're not escaping. You're fantasizing about escaping. And fantasies don't free anyone. Most people overplan because execution is frightening. If you never execute, you never fail. If you never fail, you can maintain the identity of someone who could succeed if they tried. But if you try and fail, you have to face uncomfortable truths about your abilities. So planning becomes a buffer against that discomfort. This is where things change. Successful people understand that execution provides information that planning never can. You learn more from 1 week of imperfect execution than from 1 month of perfect planning. Because execution teaches you what actually works, not what theoretically should work. Think about someone who spends a year planning a business versus someone who spends a month planning and 11 months executing. The first person has a detailed plan and zero revenue. The second person has a messy business, real customers, and income. Planning doesn't generate results. Execution generates results. Here's the shift you need to make. Do minimum viable planning and maximum viable execution. Plan enough to start, then start. Learn from execution. Adjust your plan based on reality, not theory. Repeat. Your plan will get better through execution, not through more planning. But there's a psychological barrier here. Starting with an imperfect plan feels irresponsible. You worry you'll waste time and money doing it wrong. But here's the truth, you will waste time and money regardless. The question is whether you waste them learning from real execution or waste them perfecting theoretical plans that won't survive contact with reality. Most people won't shift to execution mode because they're addicted to the feeling of preparation. Preparation feels productive without being risky. But preparation has diminishing returns. The first 10 hours of planning add value. The next 90 hours are just anxiety management disguised as strategy. Here's what happens when you prioritize execution. First, you feel exposed and uncertain. You're doing something before you feel ready. Second, you make mistakes that perfect planning couldn't have prevented. Third, you learn what actually matters versus what you thought mattered. And fourth, you make real progress while perfect planners are still planning. And here's the part that changes everything. Execution builds confidence that planning never can. When you've tried something and adjusted and tried again, you develop faith in your ability to handle uncertainty. That confidence is what actually enables escape. Planners stay trapped because they never develop that confidence. So here's what you do starting today. Take your current plan and identify the minimum you need to know to start. Not to succeed, to start. Then start today. Not next week when you've researched more. Not next month when things settle down. Today. Imperfectly. Messy. Real. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will spend years planning their escape and die without ever attempting it. They'll have elaborate plans and zero execution. And on their deathbed, they won't regret trying and failing. They'll regret never trying at all. The question you need to answer is this. Would you rather have a perfect plan you never execute or an imperfect start that leads somewhere? Because one feels safer but accomplishes nothing. The other feels risky but creates the possibility of actual freedom. What's coming in the final chapter will determine whether everything you've learned creates lasting change or becomes another thing you knew but didn't do. You've reached the end of this book, but nothing will change unless you decide right now that this is different. You've consumed information before. You felt motivated before. You've made plans before. And you're still in the rat race. So the question isn't what you've learned, it's what you're going to do differently starting today. Here's why this matters. The gap between knowing and doing is where dreams die. Most people reading this will agree with everything, feel temporarily motivated, and then return to their exact same habits. They'll stay trapped not because they don't know how to escape, but because they won't do what they know. Let me show you what's really happening right now. You have a choice. You can close this book and let it become another piece of consumed content that made no difference in your actual life. Or you can use this moment as a turning point, the day you stopped consuming and started executing. Pay attention to this part. Everything in this book works. Protecting your mornings works. Ruthless prioritization works. Implementation over learning works. Consistency works. Embracing discomfort works. Building networks works. Sustainable habits work. Execution over planning works. But only if you actually do them. Only if you cross the gap from knowing to doing. Here's what separates people who escape the rat race from people who stay trapped. Decision followed by action. Not motivation. Not perfect circumstances. Not ideal conditions. Decision and action. Right now, in this moment, you either decide this is the turning point or you decide to stay comfortable. Most people won't make a real decision because real decisions are uncomfortable. They create obligation. They remove excuses. They mean you can't blame circumstances anymore if nothing changes. So people make soft decisions. I should probably do this instead of, I'm doing this. And soft decisions produce soft results. This is where everything changes or stays the same. You need to make one specific commitment right now. Not a vague intention to try harder or work on it. A specific, measurable commitment with a clear action attached. Something you can't wiggle out of later. Think about what happens in the next 72 hours. If you make a specific commitment and take action within 72 hours, this book has a chance to change your life. If 72 hours pass with no action, this book becomes shelf decoration and you stay exactly where you are. Here's the shift you need to make right now. Choose one habit from this book. Just one. The one that resonates most or scares you most. Write down the specific action you'll take tomorrow to implement it. Set an alarm. Tell someone who'll hold you accountable. Make it real. Make it immediate. Make it impossible to ignore. But here's the final truth you need to hear. You've been in the rat race for years because your daily habits put you there and keep you there. And your daily habits won't change through information. They'll change through decision and repetition. You need to decide that your current life is no longer acceptable. Not disappointing. Not frustrating. Unacceptable. Most people won't reach that level of decision because they're tolerating their current situation. It's not good, but it's not unbearable. And tolerating mediocrity is the most dangerous position because it removes urgency while consuming years. You need to get angry enough at where you are to commit to doing what's necessary to leave. Here's what happens when you truly commit. First, you feel fear because commitment means you might fail visibly instead of staying safely in preparation. Second, you take action despite fear because the commitment is stronger than the fear. Third, you see results, small at first, then compounding. And fourth, you become someone different. Someone who escapes instead of someone who dreams about escaping. And here's the part that determines your next decade. Every person who's escaped the rat race had a moment where they decided enough was enough. Where they stopped consuming information and started executing. Where they stopped waiting for perfect conditions and started building from wherever they were. This could be your moment. Where you could let it pass and stay trapped. So here's what you do right now before you put this down. Write this sentence and complete it. The one habit I'm implementing starting tomorrow is underserved. The specific action I'm taking is underserved. And I'm accountable to underserved. Then actually do it tomorrow. Not when you feel motivated. Tomorrow. Here's the final uncomfortable truth. Most people reading this won't do that exercise. They'll read it, think, that's a good idea, and move on. And that's exactly why they'll still be in the rat race 5 years from now. Because good ideas without execution are worthless, and execution requires decision followed by action. The question you need to answer right now is this. Are you going to use this book as information to consume, or as a blueprint to execute? Because consuming more information while staying trapped is insanity. And you've been stuck long enough. This is your moment. The rat race continues only if you continue letting it. Your freedom begins the moment you decide it begins and take the first action to make it real. Everything else is just comfortable suffering disguised as life. What will you choose?